Bob Scarff, you used to be the national MD of Countrywide for their estate agency in FS Arms, with 800 branches and 6,000 people under your remit. You left Countrywide as part of the Allison Cull in 2015 and now run the successful Callwell, which we've done in other videos. The one question I would like to ask you is, if we parachuted you back into your old role tomorrow, where you were not CEO of the firm, but basically in charge of all the estate agents and FS, what would you do tomorrow? Talk to me.
Well, the first thing I'd do is get behind the decision that's been taken since I left to separate the estate agency and the financial services division. Now, that's what I've been told, but I don't know the extent to which that is really the case. I want to get behind that fairly early on. It's certainly true that we were achieving a mortgage penetration rate into house sales well in excess of 60%, which most people outside of Countrywide don't believe me when I tell them, but it's true. And one of the key reasons why was that it was the number of mortgages that we did on other agents' house sales. And the reason we were able to achieve that is that we were seeing customers, applicants, buyers much, much earlier in the process, and that was because of the integration between estate agency and financial services. So I'd want to get behind that straight away. Almost as importantly, I'd also want to just find out quite quickly how many people we've got working for us, who's left from the old days, who's come back. Because if there's one thing that's gone wrong since 2015, it's not having enough people. I'm not even going to say enough of the right people, because I have no view on whether they're the right people or the wrong people. There just isn't enough people.
Because Allison did make a bit of a cull. I mean, let's be frank. You said before, Grenville, the previous boss, he made a bit of a cull. You said, didn't you?
Yeah.
But he replaced them.
He replaced them with people who were industry experienced and or equipped to do the jobs that he wanted to be done. So he brought in somebody very specifically to run financial services, who was a financial services expert, far more than the person that he replaced. So there was, he strengthened the team. He transferred out a few old players and didn't renew their contracts. But
almost like a football manager, isn't it?
Precisely, that's exactly where I was going with it. But brought in fresh blood, experienced players, etc. Whereas what came afterwards was, it seemed to me from the outside, a lot of people that had played the game for a long time were now being made to feel so uncomfortable that they wanted to leave, or they were asked to leave anyway, and they weren't necessarily replaced with people that knew what they were.
I mean, there's some big names. There's you, Nick Dunning, you had Brian Mansell, you had Ian McKenzie. The list goes on, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. How many do you want me to go through? But there's still a load of very good people there, and that's come back to my what would I do on day one? I'd want to meet up with everybody straight away.
Who's everyone? Like the people running all the different branches?
The people, my direct line reports in this fictitious new job.
Yes,
it would be my new line reports. Most of whom I would probably already know, because a lot of people that used to work.
Because let's be frank, sometimes there was probably people that were almost being held back by you older guys. I say that nicely. They might have flourished and grown by now.
I think that's absolutely true. I'm sure that if I worked closely with these people who I last worked with 5 years ago, I would see different people than I saw 5 years ago. They were still on their way up now, and I think they will have, the very fact that they're still there must mean that they've grown and developed and become even better at their jobs.
Okay, I know you've not spoken to anyone, but what would you do to motivate them to, because a lot of people focus on the share price, which is almost irrelevant, isn't it?
It's completely irrelevant to the boys and girls on the ground floor, but of course people keep making it relevant. They keep telling them they should be worried about it. I can't ever remember any presentation I ever did to anybody that talked about the share price or the market cap or what the investors were thinking of us. It was all about our market share and our NPS ratings versus our competition. It was all about customer service. It was all about being the best. And if there's any real hesitation in me taking on the challenge, if you were to wave this magic wand and offer it to me, it's whether or not in too many of these places too much momentum has been lost. and whether it's really that possible to get it back to how it used to be. Because we all know that if a branch is very successful that then starts to falter, as they do, you've probably got quite a lot of time to see the problem coming and do something about it before it's too late. Because you might know that you're losing market share, you might know that your customer service standards are falling long before the man in the street has noticed. So you've got quite a few months to do something about it before it becomes a point of no return. And I just don't know whether in the era when the business was being run by people who had no instinct for such things, whether in some cases it went too far. And maybe that's what's behind some of the closures, because you get to a point when a branch is now so poor, its traction in the marketplace is so low, its market share is so low, its staffing is poor, that you either throw load more money at it and almost open it again, start from scratch.
Is it a money thing? Sorry, I'm jumping in.
Well, ultimately, yes, because you think about a branch that has eventually it's on a life support machine, and we did one of the things that I was most proud of in what we was doing up until I was leaving was that we would always have in every subsidiary, and there was 10 of them across the country, we'd always have 5 branches that were, if you like, special measures. It's not what we called them, but that's what they were in, and that we were all focused on that. So there was more marketing activity. We allowed the managing directors to spend a bit more on marketing and people than they would otherwise have done, because it's in all of our interests to get this one back to where it was. And there was always 4 or 5. There always is going to be. But the test is it's the same 4 or 5 a year later, then you're wasting your time. Let's close those branches because they're never ever going to be any good. But it never was. It was always we were always sorting problems out, and now something else has become a problem.
Do you think there's too many brands? I mean, there's plenty of towns where Countrywide have 3, 4, even more offices in a town.
I don't know that's true anymore. That's again.
Or is that just
for day 2? I never felt that we had too many brands in the old days. I mean, I'll grant you that in 2005, when we bought Bradford and Bingley, we suddenly found ourselves with this whole sweet shop full of fabulous brands that we couldn't quite bring ourselves to not do something with. And we did have some ridiculous things where we had a business that had 16 branches, and 4 brands. Now that, I fully admit that was a mistake. We should never have done that. But as a general rule, we didn't have too many brands. We should have done, if there's anything I've regret about that whole branding thing, is that we probably should have done more to promote the power brands, Bridgefords, Taylors, Abbott's, Bears to Ease, Man & Co, than we did at the time. Now, and although this isn't the question you've asked me, isn't it interesting that Purple Bricks came along with their big TV advertising budget at a time when the only other people who could have afforded to have competed with them had got their eyes on other balls? I'm not suggesting that Countrywide should have changed the name of all their businesses to Countrywide, but they do have a website called Propertywide, which is all of the brands all in the same place. And I think had Grenville or someone had still been in charge when Purple Bricks first started to emerge as a real threat, there was more that could be done by the likes of Countrywide to promote traditional agency through TV advertising. But Purple Bricks had it all their own way because they were the only agent, and that's one of the reasons why they were able to hoodwink, and I will use that word deliberately, customers into not realising that they would have to pay even if they didn't sell, by their TV advertising, and no one else was saying anything different. And instead, what happened was, under the management at the time, they saw Purple Bricks as this real threat. They became beguiled by it and spent everything about tackling that threat, when actually there have been other things in the past, maybe nobody with such an advertising campaign and nobody with such clever tech, but we've had threats of that type in the past. And they'd have been better off, I think, investing more effort in keeping the traditional model going.
What else would you do?
Where was I? So I've sorted out my people. I've found out who still gets it and who wants to be part of it. If we've got holes, let's identify what those holes are and get those people in. and then the marketing. Because at the end of the day, if you're nothing, if you haven't got your people and your marketing right, then you haven't got a business. Now, you asked a question earlier on about, is this all about money? And I think that probably is the nub of this issue, because if you're parachuting me in on day one with empty pockets, I would have not insurmountable difficulty, but I would have difficulty delivering what I think might be needed. Whereas if you parachute me in and I've got almost unlimited resources, then the thing's a different game.
Because I can say this, I know you can't, but they probably spent too much money buying other letting agencies, and that's what almost the birds came home to roost.
That's what people say, and that may well be the case. I think from the sales perspective, I think where they went wrong was when Samantha Tyra, who effectively did the job that Nick Dunning and I were doing, became entranced by Purple Bricks and operated this dual, same single branded but dual offering, where from the same branch you can either offer this pay up front.
See, I went on record to say I thought that was a disaster waiting to happen, and yeah, they should have set up almost like a fighter brand, shouldn't they, if they were that worried about it? But yeah.
Well, that was always our working hypothesis back in 2013. I mean, the Bruce brothers were rumoured to be doing stuff in 2012. They finally broke cover in the Meridian TV area at the early part of 2013. Our working hypothesis at the time was to keep a watching brief. We weren't be panicked into anything, but we were ready that if human nature changed that quickly and all of a sudden that model has more strength than the traditional model, if we were ready with a single branded proposition, but it was a single brand that was completely different from anything else that we had previously had. We didn't even get as far as deciding what that brand was going to be. But the one thing that we had decided was that we were going to offer the traditional model through our old brands and then this newfangled thing under a completely different brand. Because what still hasn't been proven, although one might argue that it has been proven negatively, is that the conveyancing and financial services revenues that are generated by business, by Countrywide, are almost completely dependent upon face-to-face traditional model. So it would have had to have been an enormous change in human nature for it to have swept all of that away, and it hasn't done.
And that's the advantages of the high street, is that you can build those face-to-face relationships, and also, like you said, get the FS, because let's be frank, Countrywide are very good at selling mortgages onto their, aren't they?
And conveyancing.
Yeah, interesting times. Thank you, Bob.